This content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other materials as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained on here constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by Draper Goren Holm or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments whatsoever. And we have an awesome media partner called Blockchain and Booze, where you can catch this recording on, and as well as our YouTube channel, LA Blockchain Summit. And today's topic is all about music and NFTs. And what better way to discuss than with Justin and Cooper. Guys, welcome. Cheers. First episode of Blockchain and Booze.
Cheers.
Are you drinking water?
I got to get my booze on. We might have to take a break. I don't have the booze yet, so
it's all right.
I got to get on top of that.
We'll let you escape later. Not a big deal. But really quick, Cooper, Justin, introduce yourselves. Who do you work for? What do you do? We'll start with Cooper and we can go to Justin.
Cool. What's up, guys? I'm Cooper. I'm currently running crypto strategy at a project called Audius. It's a decentralized streaming protocol, doing a lot of work in the NFT and social token space and doing a lot of writing and crypto journalism. So, very, very interesting conversation. I'm really into creator economies and excited to be here.
Cool. Welcome. And we've had your founders on here before. We did a really fun panel with RAC. And that was really cool. Justin, go for it.
I'm Justin, otherwise known as Blau. Some people say 3Lau. It is Blau, but you can say whatever you want. I'm a dance music producer, musician, DJ, and blockchain enthusiast since 2014, most actively since 2017, and just excited about the potential of how distributed ledger tech and Web3 will disrupt music.
Perfect. And before we get into the whole discussion, quickly define, because we have a bunch of people listening and that will listen later on, what is an NFT? What does it mean? People hear NFTs, they're like, what the hell does that even stand for? So if someone want to give a quick definition.
Yeah, I'll take that one. NFT stands for non-fungible token. The way I like to think about this is a scarce digital collectible. So, we have the Mona Lisa in real life. You can think of an NFT as the digital version of that.
Perfect. All right, there you go. That was I think that was the shortest definition and straight to the point that I've heard and came across. So that's great. Cooper, I guess starting with you, kind of talk us through your journey in crypto, just so everyone gets familiar with who you are and how you got started and where you're at today.
Yeah, for sure. So relevant to this conversation, I went to school for music business. This is an industry that I've been very passionate about for a long time. As I was graduating, I kind of saw a ceiling in what I could do creatively in the space. And that was right around when 2017 bull market was happening for crypto. I've always been a very self-sovereign person, always very entrepreneurial. And so when I saw the opportunity to learn about something new and really make my own way, it seemed like a natural fit. Kind of went out on the limb, started working with projects on the community management side of things, got really deep into journalism and reporting, more recently covering DeFi and everything that's been going on there. And as of recently joined this project called Audius and helped them with their token launch and, just generally trying to figure out how to get creators better paid, how to build community, and how to leverage this technology to do cool and exciting things.
Cool. And Justin, I want to hear about your background too, because I read online that you rejected a job from BlackRock, right? And now you went, was it BlackRock? Did I read that correctly?
It was, and it's a job that my little genius brother just accepted, funny enough.
There you go.
He's actually going to work for BlackRock,
Nice.
Which is hilarious that how things go full circle. But I was in college studying finance and with a focus in derivatives and structured products, and was really excited about music my whole life. My goal was to go into the banking world, make enough money to survive, and then make music the rest of my life in my 40s and beyond. And it's kind of turned around the opposite way, where I started when I was 19, traveling and performing as Blau, and it was an incredible journey over the past 10 years. And now as COVID hit, of course, performances are no longer happening in the short term. And I've been able to take this year or the past year of time to experiment with my kind of passion for the intersection of both blockchain tech and music.
Cool. And Justin, you were doing also a music conference at some point where you wanted to integrate NFTs. Are you still doing that? Obviously not because of COVID, but are you experiencing with that stuff on like the metaverse, as people like to say? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of a long backstory of my wild journey through crypto that I would love to kind of get through as quickly as possible, but I'm happy to tell it, Adam, if you think I should.
Yeah.
It might take a good couple minutes, but there isn't really one way to, it's not a short one. It's not as simple as Cooper's explanation of an NFT. So the quick version is I met the Winklevoss twins in Mexico on spring break, and was fortunate to become really good friends with them. They invited me to stay with them in LA during Grammy Week. I think this was in 2014, might have been a little bit later. This was around the time they were building Gemini, and that was my first exposure to cryptocurrency at all. And I just had this fascination with frictionless value transfer, with banking the unbanked, all the kind of things that we love about Bitcoin and why we think it's so powerful and long-term, an incredible piece of technology. And fast forward to 2017, I started exploring what was then the ICO boom, and looking at on the financial side, I was trading inter-exchange arbitrage because that was fun. And on the more on the music side, I was really exploring ways that you could disintermediate the music business with this technology. And there were tons of projects that came up. I had this vision to throw a music festival and give fans ownership in the festival and give them the choice of the lineup. And that was kind of an initial concept that I was really excited about. Of course, a token that would perform such functionality would be a security. And so we ended up not doing that. But we threw a festival anyway with some really cool rewards that I worked with. I worked with Stellar Lumens and the Interstellar team there on building a mobile wallet and a reward product that we launched at this music festival with Zed, Big Sean, myself, and a bunch of others. And that was actually my first experiment with NFTs ever, where if you scan my QR code at the festival, if you found me at the festival, you actually got a limited edition Blau badge, all on the Stellar blockchain. And the fan response to that this was in 2018, the fan response to that was so huge. People were so excited about like the scavenger hunt to find Blau in the festival. And the 50 NFTs went in like 3 minutes probably, which is pretty crazy. People were swarming to scan the QR code on my phone. And that was the first time I realized that there's something really valuable in a digital asset that a musician can issue, whether it's in the form of loyalty or in the form of a song or whatever it might be. And that was kind of the next layer of my journey through crypto. From that experience, I was able to meet some really awesome people in the space, great fund managers, people like Fred Airzim, who founded Coinbase and Paradigm, and a bunch of really great mentors who I've spoken to about what does it mean to tokenize music? How do you do that in a non-securities way, in a non-security token way? And also, how do you execute that in a compliant securities consideration way? And so, forgive me, I've been I just did an hour-and-a-half podcast about NFTs. So all I've been doing all day is talking about NFTs, but I love it. So if my brain farts, I apologize. But yeah, so I'm excited about kind of two layers in how music can be shaped by NFTs. One on the collectible layer, purely as an art form, and the other as actually owning music rights, which would clearly be a security token. And I'm really excited about issuing compliant security tokens for song ownership. I'm equally as excited about issuing collectibles, which we just did with Nifty Gateway. And Cooper and I have talked about this extensively offline. His perspective is extremely informed, and he is so on top of everything that's happening in the space. So you definitely picked a great group to chat about this.
Cool. And Cooper, I kind of want to dive into you for a second. What motivated you to get into crypto, specifically in the music industry? Like why Audius? Why your path on commenting on the music industry, on doing this new wave of music royalties and whatnot? Tell me a little bit more.
Yes, I was in this class in college, and the professor introduced the idea of smart contracts. And at the time, we were studying royalty payments and black box royalties in particular. For context, in the music industry, there's very long delays between the time in which a song is streamed and when the artists actually get paid. And for me, hearing about a primitive to make payments in real time, do this automatically without middlemen, and sort of just automate the whole process, that just immediately clicked for me. I think that music is just one facet of where this technology can add a lot of value, and seeing sort of how much my friends who are musicians that are struggling to pursue a creative career, they need these tools to be able to live and sustain themselves off of creative passion. For me, it was a no-brainer to figure out how can I best understand this industry, and then eventually put forward some projects and tools to allow them to create and monetize.
I guess this next one is for both of you, because obviously you guys are very deep in the music space, in the crypto space. Why are NFTs such a prime use case for the music industry? Like, what is it about them that gets you guys very excited, and that actually has the potential to help many artists around the world? And we either with Justin, Cooper.
Just go back and forth. Yeah, Cooper and I have talked about this stuff a lot, and we share a very similar vision. So we'll probably both be adding to each other's comments as we go. But the main piece that I'm mostly excited about from a very macro scale is this idea of ascribing value to a digital creation that hasn't really been able to exist in the past. When you have an MP3 file or a JPEG or a movie file, that file is infinitely replicatable across all platforms without any permissions needed at this point in time in 2021. If you can assign any form of official nature to a media file and distribute that to those who gain a lot of emotional value out of consuming that digital media file, is that a new way to recapture value in a world where these media files are basically free and pervasive, yet there's all this uncaptured value that exists? So the most logical way to do that is by creating an identity for the original file that exists, right? An identity that can't be contested, that is immutable, and that may live on a distributed ledger. And so the natural solution is an NFT that lives on the blockchain. It could even be a fungible token too. If you issue, multiple, we in our case have issued multiple editions of NFTs, but a lot of this could be accomplished with fungible tokens as well, depending on the product. And I just got excited about this idea of letting the artists create their own market around their content instead of being dependent on, centralized distributors for, issuing that content, where, the permissions can go anywhere and anyone can listen to it at any time. So yeah, I think that's kind of what got me quite excited about the idea of like issuing digital identity to digital media. And we've seen so many amazing artists that have been able to capture that value with Beeple and RAC and all these amazing both musicians and visual artists that have been issuing NFTs.
Yeah, Cooper, I see you nodding your head a lot. I'd love to kind of hear your input.
Totally. So I think on my end, music is inherently a very emotional field of interest. Collecting music in particular is something that is very unique to other aspects in the world. So particularly for musicians, we see limited edition vinyls, we see merchandise, hat pins. I was very into the hat pin game in college for artists like Grizz and Lotus and all these jam bands. And so, you see kind of the connection that can come from communities that share physical goods. And when you take that and you put it online, to Justin's point, you can finally ascribe value and scarcity and ownership to digital items. And so for me, I see this as no different from, the days of the music industry where someone would pay $20 for a CD to listen to one song. I think that these primitives can now exist for the first time in history, thanks to NFTs and provable scarcity online.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so like we've seen the art industry pick up crazy steam, and wow, you just submitted an amazing campaign last week, sold 200K worth of NFTs within 9 minutes. Like that's crazy. And you integrated the audio side of it and the graphic JPEG traditional NFT side of it. Like, do you guys see the music industry? There you go.
We got these, and we got the physical waveform. Yeah, it's super cool.
So dope. And I'd love to jump into that in more in a second. But like, is the music industry the next phase for NFTs? Like, the art sector got more of the mainstream adoption and awareness for what these NFTs could be. Is the music industry next, or like what's next on the horizon?
I think both will develop in unison. I think music lagged the visual world for one kind of behavioral reason. Visual content can be consumed in a matter of seconds. Audio content must be consumed over a longer period of time. And so the general attention span of humans is such that, understanding a visual NFT and purchasing a visual NFT happens a little bit faster in the human mind than how we've been trained about music. And also because the idea of collecting art makes a little bit more sense based, on current behavioral human patterns than collecting music, right? Collecting music, you think of, a playlist on Spotify, whereas art collectors have been collecting art for a very long time, and it makes more sense. The idea of creating a collectible edition of a song is something that I've been excited about for a really long time, because as a song grows in popularity, as long as the artist, and there will be bad actors, right, who might double tokenize songs and might do all these things, and we can dive into that later. But as long as an artist makes a commitment to only make a certain number of limited editions of a digital copy of a song, it starts to follow the same primitive that we saw with, like Cooper mentioned, vinyl and CDs. There was a point in time in history when the internet didn't exist, and if the vinyl sold out in the record store, you'd have to borrow your friend's vinyl to listen to the songs, right? So when you think about music and how it could be tokenized. On the one hand, you have a limited edition of a song that you might still be able to access on Spotify, but only a few people have those limited edition versions of the song. And as that song grows in popularity, that art form, that tokenized art form, will probably accrue in more value. That's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is, well, what about music that never comes out on platforms, right? I have a whole catalog of ideas that I've never released. And so that's actually how I started my NFT journey. Even though we just did this song drop specifically, before we did this song drop, I actually was tokenizing unreleased music with my art director in the form of audiovisual NFTs, which gave me a means of expressing music that I actually didn't even have prior, where, you know, I didn't have to finish a song completely and release it on Spotify for someone to be able to experience a song that I was working on. So Slime Sunday, my art director, and I decided to create these audiovisual pieces. And prior to our song drop, we had done, I think, almost over 250,000 in revenue just from people who were excited about buying songs that they couldn't hear anywhere else and owning that content. And so you kind of have these three different layers of how I see music NFTs evolving. On the first hand, you have just a collectible edition of a song that's already out there or that's coming out soon. And that's really simple, right? We understand that from the art world because you have an original painting and then you have lithographs, or you have an original photograph and then you have prints, right? And it's no different. It's just an authenticated digital copy of the song that everyone else might be able to listen to. The next layer is exclusive content, where either the NFT unlocks the content in a decentralized media player, which is an interesting idea in and of itself, or the token itself represents a song that might be exclusive, that might never actually be released to the public. And that's where we see something really interesting where, you know, in my case, I have a lot of live edits that I play at my performances, and those live edits aren't out anywhere on the internet. You can't find them. You might be able to find them in a set. But imagine you're at one of my shows and you scan a QR code on the screen when I'm playing this unreleased song, and you can actually claim a token that represents this unreleased song that you witnessed in the moment. Maybe that doesn't cost you anything, but you did pay for the ticket to the show, and only you have that token and that ability to listen to this unreleased song. So I can see the exclusive content aspects of music NFTs really evolving in interesting ways in the future. The final layer is ownership, which gets really exciting and has securities implications, where a fan who, you know, you can basically create an NFT that represents a song's identity and then wrap that in a DAO token that represents ownership in the royalties of that NFT and into perpetuity. So as an artist, I can choose to issue my fans 49% ownership in a song's royalties based on a DAO token surrounding an NFT. That gets really crazy and interesting. It's definitely a security, but I do think that the regulatory environment will be friendly to that in the future as these things develop. Unfortunately, with that last component, there are still central points of failure for royalty distribution, right? Which is why what Cooper is doing at Audius is so important. We do have Spotify and all these other, you know, centralized distributors that do, like, if I were to pay my fans out who owned a piece of one of my songs, I'm still unfortunately dependent on that centralized point of failure where it still takes them 6 months to pay me. So it's inevitably going to take me 6 months to pay those fans who have that ownership, right? But over time, I do think like these things will meld, and we're looking at maybe the next decade of, you know, being probably the most significant revolutionary intersection between blockchain tech and music that has ever happened before.
Yeah.
So I'll
yeah, Cooper, I see you nodding your head a lot. I want to hear from you here.
Justin's just spot on. You know, it's hard to disagree with this, man. I think he's got it down to a T at this point. I think that there's a lot that I could dive into based on what Justin said. I think the core primitive of owning the music you consume is really important. You know, I do think this is a ways away, but the whole premise of crypto and Web3 is own the things that you provide value to. So, you know, your original question, is music the next frontier for NFTs? I think it's one of them. I think NFTs in general are just ways of tokenize any piece of content on the internet, and having these mediums to, you know, participate in the upside of anything viral, whether it's a song, a blog post, a tweet, whatever it may be. You know, all of this is right on cue for this next wave. And that's kind of why I've been spending so much time in this sector.
Cool. And Justin, you making over 200K in revenue just from people purchasing songs. They purchase it through Audius, for example, right? Okay. And
right. Let's say that. Yeah.
So how do you actually find, like, what's the average price per song? Right? Because now we're going back to like the Apple days where people would actually buy like 99 cents or $1.20 song. You know, like what's the price, and how do you know how to charge for your song? So
in this case, it's worth mentioning, Audius doesn't have NFT support yet. Okay. I'll let Cooper speak to that. In the case of my song, we actually did the issuance through a platform called Nifty Gateway.
Okay.
And we priced it based on what people were buying my, we priced our drop based on the secondary market for the audio-visual content that I released with Slime Sunday prior. So some of the stuff we were releasing that was exclusive was selling for 3 or 4 times the price in the aftermarket. That's, based on the sound block, the visual file, and the waveform. We came up with that as a team with Nifty Gateway, and that's kind of what determined the price in that instance for a quote-unquote collectible song. Let's fast forward to the securities part, because it's really easy to price that. The way that something I'm doing that is not really a secret anymore, I'm issuing equity in my next album with a company called Republic. They're incredible. Compliant securities Reg CF offering. And the way that we're valuing my next album is based on the historical cash flows of my last album and how much income that's generated. And ever since I've been an independent artist, my catalog has generated over $1 million, which is like pretty crazy because most artists don't get paid to make for music. And that was a choice that I made 6 years ago, having the foresight that these royalty, like owning my master rights, would be really valuable in the future as streaming would grow and as people were more willing to pay for subscription services. So pricing a security token that represents a song is kind of easy because you can base that on like previous cash flows from an artist or just pure demand for ownership in that master recording. The collectible layer is harder to price because it's a collectible, it's art. And that's where these markets play their efficient role as markets. We have these, on Nifty Gateway, for instance, we have an auction mechanic, which drove the price of the one-of-one edition of my song from $7,000 to $77,000 in a period of 23 hours. Why? Because that was the price that someone was willing to pay for the first song, the first ever song NFT, which to me, I don't know, there's some artwork out there that goes for pretty crazy prices. And if this truly was the first of its kind, maybe it has a lot more value than that in the future. But when it comes to the open edition pricing, it gets a little bit different. The open editions are, obviously limited in that once they're issued, they will never be issued again. So the way the open editions work, for those of you who aren't familiar, we basically say, hey, the smart contract is going to mint as many assets as it does in 10 minutes. And after that, we will never mint another asset again, right? So with an open edition, the price is set based, like I said, based on previous market data, but also, how I would like to think the actual price that we got is kind of similar to 7x the annualized income of a popular song of mine. So like it kind of lined up in a really weird way. I don't know if that's coincidence, but a popular song of mine will traditionally generate, one song can generate anywhere between $30,000 to $80,000 a year. A not so popular song, maybe $10,000 to $20,000 a year. And so the open edition ended up generating 175K, which if you think about like a traditional equity multiple on what a song might generate in revenue, it's close, it's not far, right? And so that's interesting that the market was willing to make that many editions of the open edition of my song. But yeah, these are all kind of the 3 ways to think about it. And yeah, I could speak forever on this. So Cooper, I'm sure you have a lot to add.
Yeah, I'd like to distinguish that, Justin's collectibles are very different from choosing to stream that song one time. I think that people were willing to pay so much for these collectible versions because it came with the physical item that Justin had mentioned. It was the first of its kind. There was an incredible strategy behind the release. There's a lot of stuff that went into making that collectible as valuable as it was. I think to the point about how do you price music, this is a completely variable discussion that, quite frankly, is completely uncharted territory. Historically, artists have had either you don't set your price, you get a streaming rate depending on what the platform sets, or you get Apple's 99 cents, and like, it's going to be a very interesting conversation to sort of train artists on what their songs are worth. But I personally believe this sort of design space for musicians to determine the value of the content they release, it opens a lot of really, special avenues for people to distinguish, one song versus another, one artist project versus another, and just really giving them the ways to be flexible and modular in how they price and consume content.
Yeah.
We could dive into that specifically, actually, yeah. Cooper, because you and I have had a conversation, and a lot of people are like, this is actually really important. So this is not NFT related. This is more streaming related, but it's all relevant. People pay $9.99 a month for Spotify, whatever it is today. I forget. If an artist set a certain price at, a fractional cent of a song per stream, and you as a listener were listening to, let's say you listen to 1,000 songs a week, 2,000 songs a week, 3,000 songs a week. Depending on what the artist prices that stream at, you actually couldn't conceivably spend more than $9.99 a month if you were directly paying the artist at a lower rate. So what I mean by that is, if Spotify pays me a fifth of a cent per stream, okay, a fifth of a cent per stream, but I want to charge my fans a third of a cent per stream, right? And let's say all other artists, let's assume this utopian world where all other artists charge a third of a cent per stream. It would actually be cheaper for you to load up a wallet and listen to all your favorite artists than the $9.99 a month Spotify charges you, because you physically couldn't listen to that much music in a month of time. Does that make sense? If you multiply the amount of times you listen to a song, it wouldn't ever end up at $9.99, and yet the artist would capture all the value if they set their prices fairly. Yeah. So basically, what I mean by this is Spotify is capturing, all of this value to run its company and its platform, and for its shareholders, that is missing the boat for the artists. So there are like interesting pricing mechanics that when you get into like a stream by stream price, situation that Audius is exploring, and Cooper can speak more to, it actually is both value add and is a positive sum game for the listener and the artist, which is something, is a deeper conversation that we don't need to dive into. But if you do the math, it ends up being a positive sum game.
Cooper, go ahead and speak on that if you'd like. It's super interesting, because how do you actually get to the point where you reverse the entire cycle and approach it from that perspective? I mean, I feel like that's sort of what Audius is trying to target in a sense. I mean, talk us more through that.
Yeah, so customizable streaming rates, that's kind of like the high level premise here. To Justin's point, today when you stream a song on Spotify, you're not giving any payment directly to that artist. It's kind of going to this collective bucket that get issued pro rata to all the streams on the platform. So this inherent premise of like, I stream Justin's song, he gets the payment directly, that in and of itself is game changing. Like, you don't really see that as someone consuming content, but under the hood, that's just the thing that makes perfect sense. Where this gets more interesting is around, how does an artist set a fair rate for that? And how do you make sure that people are going to want to consume it in an easy way? This is something that we're struggling and very excited to tackle. But like, how does a consumer become comfortable with the fact that every time they press play, they are issuing a payment to listen to a song? I think that we're very trained and sort of, we understand subscription models, we understand fixed amount per month. You don't have to think more about that. Very simple, right? And so there's definitely a lot of nuance that comes into every single time you stream a song, paying a rate, or having to know the difference in rates when you're streaming different content. But I do believe, to Justin's point, the average person listens to no more than, 50 to 100 songs a week, maybe more than that on a month. But like, when you do the math here, I think that people will be pleasantly surprised by how much they're able to save and how powerful it is when you pay directly to the artist rather than to this entity that has other intentions with how that money is distributed.
Interesting. How much they save and how much the artist gets. I mean, it's like Cooper said, the 100-song rule. Like, if you did the math and you said, if you did the math yourself, and let's say you listen to 100 songs a week, you either pay Spotify the $9.99 or 400 spins over at a third of a cent, ends up being cheaper for the listener and more money to the artist. So it's just a question of like whether or not like people will adopt that paradigm. And I think that's a separate conversation.
Yep.
But from a value standpoint, it's more efficient.
Yeah, I'd echo that sentiment, that I don't think that the premise of changing the way that we pay for music fixes the problem. I think that there's a lot of user training that goes into people liking these platforms, to the content being freely available on these platforms. I do believe that Audius has sort of teed off this conversation around flexible payment and, different consumption of content. But that's not to say that Audius isn't going to be the only person doing it. I believe very firmly that the Spotifys and Apple Musics of the world, over time, they're going to have to adapt to the way that consumers pay for their service, in the same way that record labels adapted to a streaming world today.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of take the conversation more from the live events perspective, even though we are in COVID and COVID has gotten rid of all of live events, including ours, right? We host LA Blockchain Summit and a plethora of conferences throughout the year, but we can't, everything's digital. But when we start transitioning more into the live event space, how do you guys imagine the MGM Grands, the Caesar Palaces, the Staples Centers of the world kind of utilizing the power of NFTs for their live events outside of the QR code scan that you mentioned, Justin? And I want to entertain this like creative idea and see if you guys are thinking about this. Is it already in the works?
So the live event space in NFTs is quite a bit more complicated than thinking about just the content-based NFTs. Only because tracing who gets paid what, believe it or not, gets more complicated in a live setting than it does with a song. With a song, there are splits that are agreed to before it's ever issued or released, and you can literally issue payments based on those agreements that are usually relatively straightforward. People tend to assume that copyrights are a little bit complex, but like the splits of a song are not that complicated. There's the publishing side of a song, the master side of a song, and different people own different percentages of those two sides of the song, and the royalties are split. When you get to the live side, like associating NFTs with merch sales is interesting. Associating NFTs with tickets is a whole other category that I think, maybe we shouldn't talk too much about, because there are a lot of people doing that and exploring that and utilizing private blockchains and NFTs simultaneously to, execute that vision. But what excites me most about NFTs in a live setting is actually access. So in the future, when everyone has a mobile wallet, like everyone has an Instagram account, and they hold their proof of memory, their proofs of memory or proof of loyalty in that wallet, they literally scan their phone to get access to the VIP section if they've been to 10 or more shows at Staples Center, right? Like these loyalty points that are also freely tradable and interoperable in the secondary market. So this is where like people say, well, why do you need a blockchain for rewards? And the answer that Cooper always explains very well, and Cooper, I would love for you to take over here, is the interoperability of these assets and the secondary market for these assets almost necessitates them living on a blockchain. And Cooper, I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely echo the access point of view. Like you see people today collect festival passes, wristbands, all these sort of things. When you put them in a digital form and give them a way to be freely traded, I think that in of itself is really exciting. Justin's point about sort of like loyalty points and why you need a blockchain, the freely composable nature to take your loyalty points and trade them around, to engage with the community, to do new and exciting things. Historically, loyalty points are limited to you and you alone. Maybe you can trade them in with the company that issued it to you. You can get cash back or something, but you're really locked into that system. If you no longer want to be a user of that platform, all those loyalty points you accrued are basically worth nothing. With crypto and sort of tokens and primitives, you can take that, go out of the ecosystem, trade them to someone else who's a power user, and sort of earn and collect revenue the entire time you're using a platform, which in and of itself is incredibly powerful from a number of reasons.
Super interesting to see how this plays out in the next few years as COVID kind of comes down and people feel more comfortable to attend live events. I want to jump into the QA section really quick because we have some pretty interesting questions for you guys. This one comes from David Padula. Are market sales still driven based on artist awareness and existing demand? Tree falls in the forest, parentheses, where the popular artists command the most of money, or do indie artists seem to be selling as well?
I think
indie artists, saying like more like less popular artists, for example, right?
Can I tell a story and you?
Yeah, go for it.
Story. So, as important as mainstream awareness of the artist is, so is provenance, and it's already happening. So, I have not won an auction on Super Rare because anytime I bid on something, it shows up in the feed and someone outbids me because it's me. So literally, like, because I'm bidding on something, like I have not been able to win anything because someone will always outbid me, and they make fun of me on Twitter. Like they'll tweet me like, "I saw you bid on this piece and I outbid you, haha." I'm like, I actually really like this indie artist, and there are cheaper pieces that are maybe around $1,000, but it's happened to me multiple times, and so the nature of having a transparent feed of bids and like people can see my wallet address bidding on something, that makes them want it more. That's crazy, right? Like, it's like it's an interoperable auctionary environment that I can't really explain. Anyway, so it's for indie artists and known artists. I think that provenance plays a role, and like who else likes the art plays a role, the same as in the traditional art world.
I think the people that have been doing the best with this, quote unquote, are people like Justin, like RAC, who have established projects. You see them doing really crazy figures that just sort of speak to the testament of the space. Where I'm most interested is there's probably about 20 artists in the world doing NFTs in a very serious way right now. The ones that are on the lower end of that spectrum, they're not household names. They have, maybe a couple of thousand monthly listeners on Spotify, but because of the fact that they were early and got whitelisted on Super Rare, they're able to sell pieces for like 1 ETH, 2 ETH a pop, basically $1,000 or two. And, that might not seem a lot from like a oh, this is popping off, this is crazy. But for these artists, that's more than they're going to see in streaming in months or years, you know, and like giving them the opportunity to monetize on the back of a new and exciting technology. Like, this is why I've been encouraging so many people to just lean into it. You know, I think there's this expectation that to do an NFT, you have to do it like Blau and sell $200,000 in 9 minutes. It's like, no, if you can sell a digital collectible for $100 to your biggest fans, that's a huge win, especially in a digital world where there's no touring and there's no opportunity to do that elsewhere.
You also have, I just want to give another great example. You have artists like Trevor Jones, who might not have the biggest name in the traditional art world. He's an incredibly talented artist. And because he was one of the first to utilize NFTs in a new way, I mean, his reputation in the crypto art, he's like a father of the crypto art space. And he's an incredibly talented painter. Same with Audius, who was able to do $300,000 in sales. And I guarantee you, like, there haven't been that many galleries prior to her. I mean, I'm sure now the galleries are insane. There's insane demand from galleries, but for Audius, you know, they wouldn't have had that platform if it weren't for NFTs in the first place. So, you know, in that sense, like, we're seeing a mixture of the Beeples of the world, myself, RAC, and also new artists that are just establishing these brand new reputations in the crypto art realm, who otherwise have barely even touched the traditional art realm. And it's nice to see that there are high price points on both sides. It's nice to see that it's not skewed in one direction. In many cases, I mean, the Trevor Jones Pac drop did way more than mine. I mean, I think it did over $1 million. People might have set the record, but Pac has done more in total volume, I think, over the length of his career. So, you know, there's space for everyone. And that's
yeah.
the
I'll add in there quickly too that I think what's really fascinating is, for the first time in history, graphic designers have a way to monetize their works. You know, historically, these people have been in the background. They've done commercial collaborations with people, but with NFTs, you know, Justin mentioned Audius, Fuck Render is one that I really like a lot. Like, these artists that have huge followings on Instagram but can't really survive off the back of their clout on a social platform. You know, NFTs give them a way to really establish their brand, develop a community, and be sustainable off of their work. And I think that premise is so, you know, correlated with musicians and being able to approach this from the mindset of like, I don't need to always worry about how many playlists I can get on Spotify. I don't need to allocate a marketing budget to people to plug me on a playlist to get a certain amount of plays to survive off music. You know, there are new and creative ways to get paid. And if you do that right, I think it's going to have exponential dividends.
Cool. Yeah. Next question. This one comes from Alex Yates. What has been the most effective and impactful strategies for artists to utilize NFTs, both for art and song rights? How will they evolve over time?
My favorite example, and Beeple, of course, everyone's probably pretty familiar with the Beeple drop. My art director and my partner in crime on NFTs, Slime Sunday, he's done the art direction for Blau and my visual content and my album artwork for the past 5 years. We're best friends. We worked together for a really long time. And I kind of recommended NFTs as a way for him to monetize. You know, he does a lot of work for musicians, and at a time that music was suffering, so were the digital artists that were creating content for those musicians. And I had recommended NFTs as a means for him to monetize in this kind of crazy COVID world back last August, or maybe slightly prior, maybe July. And a dude who was making, you know, and not to disclose, but like making maybe, you know, 5 figures a year, suddenly turned that into 260 or 234,000 in one drop. How did he do it? He has 500,000 followers on Instagram, and Instagram has banned a bunch of his posts and works because they were too explicit. They weren't too explicit. He actually substituted explicit body parts for regular worldly items. So there were no rated X objects. They just felt that way. And the Instagram algorithm must have picked it up and literally deleted some of his works from Instagram. So he said, fuck that. I'm going to tokenize all the works that Instagram banned and put them in a coffee table, beautiful bound book, and sell limited editions of those artworks that were banned from Instagram.
These are physical
as NFTs.
artworks.
And he so he has a coffee table book with the art in it. So if you bought any of the editions, you got the full coffee table book with a QR code that linked to the NFT. And he did this a month ago, and it was literally a way for him to monetize the work that was censored on another platform. And he made $234,000, which is more money than than he's ever made in his life. And that's how this technology is changing an artist's career. Now, how is he able to sell that much worth of, open editions, which the primary source of his of that drop was open editions? Because people wanted to support him, and people wanted to support his art that was banned from Instagram. And there's a market for that, and that's just spectacular.
Yeah. I'd add on to that, the reason why that drop was successful is because Slime Sunday has a very vibrant community around him. In the music world specifically, I think that a lot of artists have clout, they have big followings on Instagram, but very few of them have genuine communities around them. What I've seen work best is when artists really lean into the Discords of the world, they lean into their true fans, creating a buzz around, that core community and allowing them to be the one that participate in these drops. If you just drop an NFT in the blue, chances are it's not going to do that well. But if you have a group of 50 people that are avidly bidding against each other, I like this example. Chet Porter, who's this electronic DJ, he's been releasing physical paintings of just like hand-drawn images. And he's not even doing them with NFTs. He's just doing auctions. And you see all these prolific DJs adding up and bidding up. And, seeing that is sort of a core testament to lean into your community, really empower them and give them ways to engage with one another. And then monetizing your NFTs is going to be the easiest part of that puzzle.
Interesting. It's super cool, these crazy stories, especially that Instagram one. I didn't know about that. And what a way to give the middle finger to Instagram, like, fuck you. I'm gonna find a way to do it. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Cooper, so I see that Audius primarily promotes like EDM artists on the site. Have you realized or have you discovered that ravers are more prone to using cryptocurrencies, or is that just the niche you guys decided to go after first?
I think it's a good bet. I think it's unclear whether or not that's true. The exciting part about Audius is that most of these people have never touched crypto before. So regardless of what music genre they're in, this is why I joined the project, to design in a new space. I think that, for our team, our artist relations team has a history at a label called Ausla, which is Skrillex's label. So naturally, a lot of our relationships were very pointed towards that direction. I think it's going to branch outwards from there. And I think it's incredibly important that we do. I'm a big bass music fan, but if we become known as just a bass music streaming platform, then we've lost, right? Like there's so many other genres out there we need to tackle. And, it's been great to see the community that's riled around that specific avenue, specifically because of remix culture, because of long form audio. There's a lot of design choices about Audius that cater to that electronic audience, but over the long term, we have every intention to branch out into more niche genres like lo-fi, bedroom pop, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. Back into the comment section or the QA section really quick. This one comes from Trek, specifically for Justin. Does Justin see using SEC sanctioned crowdfunding as the only way for NFT based business models to raise capital when using customers over VC money?
Do you want? Can you repeat that one more time while I
go for it. So, does Justin see using SEC sanctioned crowdfunding as the only way for NFT based business models to raise capital when using their customers over VC money?
The over VC money part, I'm not.
You rather raise
sure.
private money versus crowdfunding it through your customers? Is that the only?
I think it's a combination. I think that being regulatorily compliant when it comes to issuing any of these tokens is extremely important, because it will set positive precedent for an otherwise really cryptic world that people will think is kind of scammy inevitably when it starts, right? But when you assign royalty rights to someone and you compliantly issue those cash flows to those who own those royalty rights, I do think that operating within the bounds of compliance is probably the best practice in the short term for these tokens. Will I say that there will probably be funds that want to get private access to these album deals before the public? Yeah, I'm sure that will happen. I'm sure that we'll see the same way, crypto funds have access to new protocols before a public sale. I do think inevitably we will see some of that. However, the artist is more incentivized in this case to issue those rights to the fan, because there's a positive feedback loop of the fan actually marketing the song once they can participate in those rights. And that's what I'm most excited about. So an artist might be less incentivized to give ownership to a fund and more incentivized to give fractions of ownership to 1,000 different people who are then going to go share the song, which then will create more streams, which then will create more income. So I think the incentives are aligned in a positive way.
Have you guys already seen the Warner Brothers and the Universal Music Groups of the world coming after the NFT marketplace for their artists?
conversations are happening.
We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that yet.
Interesting.
But,
okay.
Can I add on to that last question? I think that it's really important to touch on legal is catching up to crypto. The question is, do you need to use SEC compliant manners to raise money from consumers over VCs? The answer is no. You're probably going to get a fine for doing that. But I think one of the most fascinating parts about crypto is that crowd raising from a global audience is one of the easiest things to do with crypto and Web3 primitives. It's more a matter of how compliant are you in that process. And someone like Justin, who has a target on his back, is 100x more likely to do this in a compliant way because he needs to, versus someone who, is a bedroom producer or something like that. And I think that it's going to be an interesting iterative process where not everyone is going to be able to do a Republic offering. Not everyone is going to care to do that. And we're probably going to see some design space in the outskirts where people are raising money in less compliant ways, but doing it successfully.
Yeah. What do you
my cocktail
right now? This is the first time a speaker making a cocktail live.
I'm making a little Manhattan with Bullet Rye, Antica Formula Bitters, or Antica Formula Vermouth, and bitters. Yeah, that's my jam. But I do think also for non-US artists, they might not have to deal with the same problems that US artists have to deal with, right? Like if there's a Brazilian artist that wants to issue equity in their album, like I have no understanding of Brazilian securities laws, so do not quote this as any form of authority or information on Brazilian securities laws. But if a Brazilian artist wants to issue equity in their song as a token, it's probably a lot easier for them to do that for their fans than it is for an American citizen, right? And so I think that's like even more pressure on the regulators to figure out how to make this stuff compliant as fast as possible, because I do think only positive value comes from it.
I agree. Yeah, me, man.
I was on mute. Yeah. Okay, so musicians obviously are tapping into NFTs. Artists are I guess, graphic designers and other artists. How can photographers, dancers, people who create sculptures, and like other creatives kind of jump into this as well? Like, have you seen dancers use NFTs before and like post like video instructions on how to do specific moves? Like, I'm just thinking out loud here, right? Like, talk to me more about that if you have.
So yeah, Cooper, you want to take that?
So I said earlier in this conversation, I think that any form of digital content can be represented as an NFT. I think the platforms that are out there today are largely catering to gaming and art content, but that's not to say that this isn't going to exist. I think Zora is an interesting protocol that's allowing you to tokenize any form of content. That primitive of being able to let someone create an NFT in the same way you would upload a video to YouTube or upload a photo to Instagram, those tools are going to be here sooner than we think. So it's really just a matter of education and ease of access that people don't need to feel really overwhelmed when they want to create an NFT in the first place.
Cool. Justin, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the market will kind of decide how these other types of creatives will issue NFTs, right? And I think that people will try a lot of different things and they'll see what works. I mean, that's kind of what it was for us with this song token launch. Prior, I had only really been issuing audiovisual NFTs with my art director as a collab. And this song NFT was very specific. Like it took us a really long time to figure out like what made sense for a song NFT, because the market was valuing purely visual NFTs. And that's where I came up with this format of a song NFT that's a collectible having 3 collectible layers. One being the artwork for a song, which every song has. The other being the audio from the song. And the last being a physical element, which was really inspired by Beeple. I'll give him credit. When he did that Infinite Objects launch, it made me think, oh my God, I just figured out how to like create a collectible around a song. Let's like make waveforms out of let's make art out of the waveforms. And so before we came up with the sound block concept, there were a couple of other concepts that we explored. One of which was actually 3D printing the audio waveform, which we found out was very expensive, but we might do that in the future, like to create a limited edition 3D printed waveform as a beautiful sculpture for someone to have in their home. And I actually came and moved to this room anyway, because like I actually put NFTs up on these 2 screens in my house. And this is like my little NFT gallery. And then right next to that, I have a Swedish abstract artist that I really like, that I've yet to hang that on the wall. But like, these are all things that I think will exist as collector's items, and the markets will be determined by the buyers.
Super interesting. What NFTs do you typically showcase? Like, what are your favorite ones?
I have a couple of Mike's, my art director, Slim Sunday, that I put up. I'm also a fan of. I actually don't own one of his works yet, but I'm intending to own a piece of Etienne Krauss. I'm a huge fan of the work that he does. Nate Hill, I own a couple of pieces from. I was very generously gifted. Metacoven very generously just gifted me a Beeple piece, so I'm very excited for that. One of the open editions, the Into the Ether edition, so I will have that at some point. And yeah, I have a bunch of screens around my house. I mean, I literally am. If you can look in the distance,
nice.
that's a new Samsung Frame TV that I'm experimenting with, and this is stuff that makes me feel great in my own home. And when I have guests, I will be so excited to show them, hey, this is a piece that I own on the wall. It's not just a piece I pulled from the internet. I bought this. I supported the artist that put the time and effort into this piece. And I think that's, that will become natural over time. It feels kind of weird right now, but I do think that will be natural over time.
Cooper, I know you just bought some pieces as well recently. Who do you own? I know you just bought like a physical, you bought a t-shirt as well from Philanthropist, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. That was some super rare swag. I actually own a couple of the same that Justin does too. In particular, Fuck Render is a guy that I really like a lot. Silly Gabe, who is Zed's art director. I'm going to butcher the name, but JSB, a couple of just sort of lower level guys. And then also some indie producers. So this artist Metza that I really like a lot, collected his piece on Super Rare. And then a bunch of just the nifty drops, like Slime Sunday, like Justin mentioned. I'm an owner of the Everything drop that Justin did. Collected one of the Dead Mouse drops from last week with Mad Dog,
Oh, Mad Dog is so good. Shout out to Mad Dog. Love his
Totally.
work.
It's a never ending rabbit hole. At this point, it's basically like I need to stop spending money on NFTs because there's so much cool stuff out here, and I need to be conscious of how much I'm investing into digital art at this point.
Yeah.
Once you catch the bug, it's over. I'm just telling you guys. Like once I would encourage you all to just make one NFT purchase and see how it makes you feel. And it might not be for you, but when I started collecting, I figured out really quickly that I love displaying these pieces in my home. And I wish I'm actually adjusting the brightness on these televisions, which is why they're not on. Otherwise you'd see them. But it's just something that really excites me. And thinking about how that applies to music excites me.
So I actually got gifted one of those Into the Ether Beeple pieces as well, Justin. So I think me and you might be the only two people in the world that got like that piece. But I think that's particularly interesting because that one was the Ethereum specific of the Beeple drop that was like very, very targeted towards the crypto crowd. And like, I don't know about you, Matt, but me getting that piece, that was one of like the first higher profile NFTs I had come across. And like that exchange of being gifted something that I knew had so much secondary value, but I would never sell. Like there's something so tangible about that. Yeah. And my relationship with that collector is now like 10x better.
And that's what's so special about NFTs as well, as you also start to think about this idea of gifting and like, and Metacoven, who's obviously, at the forefront of this innovation is really, I mean, thinking about this stuff on a level that even I wasn't, prior to speaking with him. He had me actually, I created the first song NFT that's unreleased music for him. He has that, it will always be his. And what I did was I minted a token of just a soundscape. It has a beat to it, but it's a soundscape for his museums in different virtual worlds. So he wanted, instead of like getting a random ass sound from the internet and pulling that into his museum, he wanted the music in his virtual world to match his museum pieces in his museums. And he reached out and he asked if I could do something like that. And I was like, hell yeah, that sounds awesome. So I literally made a soundscape for his museums and tokenized it as an NFT for his museums. And like the potential is really limitless.
I caught you talking about something like this on Clubhouse the other day. You were talking about all these digital art galleries and how you have to invest in a VR headset and buy an Oculus and experience, because it's a whole different way of discovering and interacting with it.
Started on Population 1 out here. This man's going to go on a tangent.
I'm not going to go on a gaming tangent here. I haven't played video for like 10 years and I got hooked on this one game because it's incredible. But I will say that I was previously a naysayer in VR, and I never really accepted the idea of like streamed concerts as being interesting. We did a couple of them, but it didn't feel the same, and it felt like it was trying to replicate something that you couldn't replicate. When you put on the VR headset and you experience a concert in VR and you watch the hand and head gestures of the people around you, it completely changes your perception of what a virtual concert looks like. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with VR, the technology has improved so much in the past 5 years. So like I tried it 5 years ago at a VR arcade in Korea, and it was cool, but like I wouldn't do it again. Now that I have a wireless Oculus Quest 2 in my house that doesn't cost that much, I think it's, for the technology that you get, it's like $200, something like that. Way less than a laptop. It just completely expands your dimension. I've even had meetings in VR in Somnium Space, which is a blockchain VR world. And it is a better experience seeing someone's avatar in VR than it is on a Zoom call. I don't know why. Maybe it's the spatial audio technology. Like when you turn your head, you hear them in your left ear. When you turn your head, you hear them in your right ear. But it does expand, bringing it back to NFTs, being able to display this art in your own virtual space takes this to a whole other level. And it feels so futuristic when I say it. And it sounds like, if a previous version of myself was saying this, I would think I was crazy. But it just takes you experiencing it to understand. Like if you buy the Oculus, check out Somnium Space, check out some of these virtual worlds, and you completely understand that at a time where everyone is quarantined and traveling less, it does create this interconnectedness that we've lost in the past year. And there's no other way to explain it.
I went to a Blau concert this weekend, but it was in crypto voxels. Went over to my friend's house and we were jamming to an amazing set from the vicinities of a virtual world. And I think that premise was so powerful, just seeing Justin behind stage, struggling with his avatar, and kind of like us leaning into this sort of, millions of avatars just all around us. Like Justin said, like head bobbing and doing all this stuff. It was a pretty...
That's so cool. Yeah, I got to get an Oculus now. You guys sold me. I'll get one and I'll join at some point. Okay, last but not least, because I don't want to keep you guys on for too long, respect your schedule, obviously. So there's a lot of creatives watching this right now, and that will be watching this as we share it with different communities and different networks. What could you guys recommend to musicians on trying to tap into Web3? And follow-up question, is there any piece of advice that you wish you would have known as you got started in the NFT space that you could kind of give as a pointer to someone else that's just starting off? So 2 questions over there.
I think for me, my number one piece of advice is don't let the money be the motivator. Because I have a lot of people ask me how to price things. And for us, it started out pretty low, it's still high priced items, but compared to what I would normally receive for my time in a performance, not even close. And so we spent the time developing a reputation and showing the world that we really care about the art form and the value accrued naturally and organically. And I think people did the same thing. And that's why he was so successful on his second drop. He released an NFT that's $1. I think one sold for 27 grand the other day. It was $1 originally. Let the market decide how to value your art. Don't assume that you know the true value of your art when you enter the space. Let the market decide, and the market will decide. And it might not be to your liking, but ultimately, if you give the market the option, I think it will turn in your favor. That's my best advice.
I love that. I definitely echo the don't let the money be the driver. It's easy to see price tags and want to get involved. I think that the more that you're in it to make a quick buck, the easier collectors can realize that and the less success you're going to have. I'd also say that NFTs are not a scary thing. I think there's this perception that you need to spend 100 hours developing a virtual universe that has all these cool elements. But, spinning up an NFT is no different from spinning up visual assets for your next release. Stick to the plan, try it one time, form relationships with collectors, and over time, I think you're going to see a really compounding success here.
Awesome.
And don't release too often. Know the value of what you issue. One thing that we explored, for a period of time, I was like, well, how would I go about tokenizing my catalog, right? So the recent drop that we did was for a new song, which makes a lot of sense, right? We create the same day the song came out, the limited edition collectible editions came out, and you'll never be able to buy one again. The same day the song was released. How do we approach songs that already came out? Well, it's a question I'm still grappling with, right? And so I would suggest to anyone who's looking to get involved in the space to not over issue, right? Take pride in the collector's glory of owning a rare digital asset, and be careful how much you choose to issue. This stands true for both visual and musician artists. Be careful how much you issue, because scarcity is real and collectors will perceive that. And so, before we started our drops, I actually spoke and took the time to chat on the phone with all the collectors that I could get in touch with to get their perception of what rarity really means. And I'll just echo, like, don't overissue.
So actually, how do you find that balance between not overissuing something? Like, what's that level of consistency that you should be overissuing? Should it be like once a year? Like Adele releases an album like once every so often, and when she does, it's a fucking smash hit, right? Or you releasing new songs? Like, how do you find that consistency now?
So for me, I don't release music that frequently. And the reason why is because I'm a crazy perfectionist, and it takes me like a year to actually call a song finished. So the song that was tokenized the other day, it might have generated a large amount of capital in a short period of time. But the time that it took me to create that song, man, it was a 9-month process. And in a normal world, I would never get paid for that 9-month process. If the song didn't succeed on Spotify because the algorithm didn't like it, I just wasted. Not that I wasted time, because I didn't waste the time. I love making music. I love the song personally, and that is enough for me. But now all of a sudden there's a market for valuing that time that I put into something. That market hasn't existed in the past. Capturing value from the emotion that a song gives you is so important. And I would argue that my drop, if people didn't like the song, they wouldn't have bought the NFT. And there were a couple of collectors that actually messaged me and said, hey, I like this other song more. I'm not going to buy this one, but when you tokenize this other one, I'm going to buy that one. And that's what shows that while there is some speculative aspects of NFTs in the short term, in the long term, it will accrue to creators' tastes collectors' tastes and what they truly like. And that's exciting to me.
Cooper, you want to add anything to that? I see you nodding your head a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this guy kills it. I don't know what else to say. He's spot on. I'd say, like, on the release side of things, the cadence around releasing, don't feel like because you sell one NFT, you have to immediately put another one up for sale. I think that the ones we've seen do well are sort of where there's marketing strategies put behind them. There's collaborations with the platforms. There's a formal marketing release strategy. In the same way you can drop a song on SoundCloud at any point in time. It's not the best strategy. Instead, have a formal budget behind your marketing, have a campaign, space it out so that every NFT means something. And if you can do that well, I think you're going to see success and people coming back to collect again and again.
Yeah, super dope.
One other thing just to piggyback off of that, it's also creatively impossible to inject an immense amount of meaning into multiple pieces at a very fast rate. So for me, I only have so much creative energy that I channel into one song. I can't replicate that across multiple songs in a short feedback cycle. It's impossible, right? And I think that collectors and people who appreciate art have an understanding of that for the most part, right? Like, they understand that it might take me a really long time to finish something. And if they see another artist with a really quick feedback loop, they might think maybe that artist didn't put as much emotion and thought into this piece. Maybe there isn't as much hidden meaning that I want to explore in this piece. And, there have been songs in my career that I've played live that I still haven't come out with. And they've been like sitting around for 4 years just because I know that they're not perfect. And if you're an artist listening to this, take that time before you tokenize something. You could show it to as many friends as you want if it's unfinished. But before you issue it as a token, make sure it's in its final form. And it's at that point where you are truly excited and proud to issue that token. And if you can't answer that question for yourself, then don't issue the token.
Fucking love that. That's amazing.
That's a perfect place to end off. Cooper, unless you want to add another cherry on top.
Nah, not going to top that.
Awesome. Yo, Cooper, Justin, you guys killed it. Thank you so much for your time. Justin, cheers. Cooper, cheers. Thank you for being on Blockchain and Booze. Before I let everyone go, though, quickly tell us where we can find you, learn more about your projects. We'll start with Cooper and go with Justin.
Yeah, best place to find me is on Twitter at Cooper Trupa, Audius at Audius Project. Definitely I'm most active, and I also live on Discord, Cooper Trupa number 9799. Hit me up.
Cool.
Oh, you're lucky. You got 9799. You can't change that, can you, on Discord? I think mine's 2475, Blau number 2475. Anyway, and for me, it's just 3LAU everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify. For musicians, mostly Spotify. That's where my following lives. I don't have access to any of those 2 million people that listen to my music, unfortunately, because Spotify protects that data. But yeah, 3LAU everywhere. And
awesome.
thanks for
if
listening.
you guys want to stay in the loop with Draper Gorenholm, LA Blockchain Summit, or myself, you can follow me at LevyChain on Twitter, and check out at LA Blockchain Summit, SMT, and Draper Gorenholm. You guys have been awesome. And before I let you guys go again, really quick, we have the networking session right now, which is my favorite part of Blockchain and Booze. If you guys aren't busy, you guys have some time to spare. I know all these people watching would love to meet you guys and hear more about you and interact with you personally. So feel free to stay around if you can. But basically, if you're new to Blockchain and Booze, this next part is super cool. I'm going to basically end this session, and we're all going to distribute to these colorful tables where we'll be able to bounce from seat to seat and meet everyone that's been watching live. So but in order to do so, make sure to have your camera on, make sure to have your microphones on, or else you're going to be extremely confused. So microphones on, cameras on. Guys, you've been great. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
Peace out, guys.